Sunday, November 9th, is the International Day of Prayer for the Persecuted Church. Christians across the globe will lift their voices for those suffering for their faith. My co-anchor George Thomas is in Afghanistan, where the government does not even recognize Christians. He's joined by CBN correspondent Gary Lane.
And hello from Kabul, Afghanistan. These are very interesting times in this country. So much has been experienced in the last 7 years since America's war on terror. So many changes politically as well as economically. But to talk more about the situation, here's my fellow colleague Gary Lane from CBN News. Is also a worker with the Voice of the Martyrs, has been doing some tremendous work. You're keenly aware of what's taking place in this country. Can you tell us what are the reports you're hearing about the stepped-up efforts against Christians in this place?
George, the whole Christian community is on edge right now because several weeks ago, Christian aid worker Gail Williams was shot and killed not far from this location where we're standing right now, about 8 in the morning. The Taliban claimed credit for that, but she was with the organization SERV. That's a UK-based Christian organization that is here doing work serving the people of Afghanistan. But around the community here, Christians, both the foreign workers and the indigenous ones, are very nervous because there have been threats against them, threats against their lives. The Taliban say they want them all out of the country.
Tell us about about the believers. What's their response to this persecution that they're facing?
Well, the indigenous believers are lying low right now. They've been lying low. It's an underground church here, so they're used to lying low. They're not above ground. They're very secretive because obviously most of them are Muslim background believers, and they will be killed if it's exposed that they are Christians. So they meet in small house groups, maybe 4 or 5 at a time, no more than about 10, but they're scattered around the country. The church is growing slowly here.
And the Karzai government, what are they doing?
Well, the Karzai government isn't doing much of anything. Right after the murder death of Gail Williams, they sent some police in this area to protect people, but that wasn't really long-lasting. And the Karzai government doesn't really admit that there are Christians here in Afghanistan. Once when the president was asked, what about the Christians? How come you don't recognize them in your constitution? His response was, there aren't any Christians in Afghanistan. So it's a very difficult and tenuous situation.
Tell us about the work of VOM and what it's doing to support the believers
the Voice of the Martyrs, when they see persecution here, they'll go in and help the families. Also, they're helping the evangelists. They provide support for them, encouragement, prayer, and also provide them with the literature they need. They did assist in the recent printing of the very first Dari Bible. That's the language of Afghanistan. So the evangelists are very grateful for that.
Gary, thank you so much for all your insights. It's great to partner with you here in Afghanistan. Gary Lane reporting with me here from Afghanistan. You know, the church here in Afghanistan is rather secretive. It is underground, as Gary mentioned. But in another place, in one of the areas that is home today to the oldest Christian community, and that is Iraq. I recently had a chance to go to Iraq, specifically to the area of Mosul, where there has been Christians have been facing some tremendous persecution. Here is my report from just outside Mosul.
4 men burst into the room. Their faces were covered. They started pointing their guns at us, screaming, telling us to get out of bed.
It was a night that changed Sabah's life forever.
They tied my husband's hands, blindfolded him, and threw him into the back of the car.
Within hours, the call came in from Sunni insurgents who had kidnapped her husband.
How much money did they ask for your husband?
$50,000. I did not have that kind of money.
10 days later, his body was dumped on the side of a road in the northern Iraqi city of Mosul.
All the bones in his body were broken. He was hacked repeatedly and choked to death.
His crime being a member of Iraq's tiny Christian community. Her husband was killed 4 years ago. Today, she faces another unimaginable crisis. On October 4th, radical Muslims in Mosul started killing Christians. Sabah, along with thousands of Christians, fled their homes after extremists threatened to kill them if they didn't convert to Islam.
Yes, that's the pressure we faced. Most of the Christian families were paying money to Al-Qaeda in exchange for protection, but that money got us nowhere.
Today, she and dozens of Christian families have sought refuge in this cultural center outside Mosul.
We used to have parties and different meetings in this hall, but now we've converted it into a place for these refugees.
Before the U.S.-led invasion, there were about 1 million Christians in Iraq. They lived in relative security, free to worship and build churches. But after the invasion, Muslim radicals started targeting them.
There are people and groups behind the scenes that we cannot see who want to drive the Christians out of Iraq. This is nothing short of an ethnic cleansing of a specific group of people.
Dr. Hussein Sinjari, a human rights activist, blames Al-Qaeda and other Sunni insurgent groups for the violence against Christians.
This is the fundamentalist Islam. This is the fascist Islam. This is the Qaeda. This is the Islam al-Qaeda, and they don't like the other.
Church leaders here estimate that most of Iraq's Christians have now fled or been killed, and about 13,000 have left Mosul. They're part of the more than 4 million Iraqis the United Nations says have fled their homes since the war began.
We are glad that Saddam is gone, but I must tell you that at least we felt safe back then. No one ever dared to attack us. Now we are being killed.
Today in the towns of the Nineveh Plain, a few miles northeast of Mosul, Christians have taken refuge in schools and churches.
Some 250 Christian families have fled the violence in Mosul and have moved to this particular village in Bartella. There is still tremendous amount of fear in this community because there is concern that the insurgents as well as Al-Qaeda could slip into this community.
Mosul is one of the most dangerous cities today in Iraq. In addition to Al-Qaeda, U.S. commanders say at least 12 insurgent groups operate in the city. But as U.S. and Iraqi forces launch new security operations, the concern is that some of these insurgents will move into the areas where Christians have taken refuge. Meanwhile, security around Mosul has improved somewhat. The government is pledging financial support and protection for every Christian family that returns to Mosul. But so far, just handfuls have returned. George Thomas, CBN News, Northern Iraq.
Thanks, George. It's a horrible situation for Christians there in Iraq, and we do pray for their safety. And to find out how you can take part in the Global Day of Prayer for the Persecuted Church this Sunday, just visit our website at cwnews.org.